Microeconomics Lecture 2 Theory of the Consumer Cardinal Utility Analysis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day, everyone, and welcome back to our microeconomics courses. I'm Dr. Maida Mustafa Sadiq, Associate Professor of Economics at the Faculty of Administrative Science, National University, Sudan. In our previous lecture, we introduced the field of microeconomics and discussed how consumers and producers make decisions in markets. Today, we move one step further by studying one of the earliest and most influential theories of microeconomics. The Cardinal Utility Theory. So, this theory attempts to answer a simple but very important question. Why do consumers buy the goods they buy? Every day, each of us makes a dozen of economic decisions. We decide whether to buy coffee or tea, whether to purchase a new mobile phone or save our money, and how much food or clothing to buy. Although these decisions may seem ordinary, economists believe they follow logical patterns that can be studied scientifically. The Cardinal Utility Theory provides one of the most or of the first systematic explanations of consumer choice. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to explain the concept of utility, distinguish between total utility and marginal utility, understanding the law of diminishing marginal utility, explain how consumers reach equilibrium, apply equimargin principle to real life situations. So, the cardinal utility theory assumes that satisfaction a consumer receives from consuming goods and services can actually be measured numerically in hypothetical units called utils. Economists, as I told you, call these imaginary units of satisfaction utils. Now it is important to understand that utils are not real physical units like kilograms or liters. They are hypothetical units created simply to help economists measure satisfaction. Suppose you are extremely thirsty after walking for several hours under the hot sun. The first bottle of water you drink provides enormous satisfaction. We might say, hypothetically, it gives you 50 utils. The second bottle may still satisfy you, but perhaps only 35 utils. The third bottle gives you 20 utils, and the fourth bottle only 10 utils. Notice something very interesting. Your satisfaction continues to increase, but each additional bottle provides less additional satisfaction than the previous one. This simple observation forms the foundation of cardinal utility analysis. The theory was developed by famous economists who are or including William Stanley Jefferson and Carl Menger, Leon Walras, and was later refined by Alfred Marshall. Their objective was to explain how rational consumers distribute their limited income among different goods in order to maximize total satisfaction. Although modern economics has largely replaced this theory with the ordinal utility theory, cardinal utility remains extremely valuable because it introduces many fundamental concepts that are still used today. Let me come to explain the main concepts or the basic concepts of the cardinal utility theory, utility and total utility. Let us define our first concept, utility. Utility simply means the satisfaction, happiness, or benefits. Satisfaction, happiness, or benefits that the consumer receives from consuming goods or services. Notice that utility is completely subjective. Different people obtain different levels of satisfaction from exactly the same product. For example, one student may love coffee, another student may prefer tea, someone else may dislike both. Therefore, the amount of utility obtained depends on individual preferences, whether you prefer or not. Instead, economists simply study how these preferences influence consumer decisions. Next, we have also total utility. Total utility is the total amount of satisfaction obtained from consuming all units of a commodity or a certain number units of a commodity. Suppose you eat several slices of pizza. Each slice contributes some satisfaction. When we add together the satisfaction from all slices consumed, we obtain total utility. As more units are consumed, total utility generally increases. However, it does not increase forever at the same rate. Eventually, the increase becomes smaller and smaller. Why? Because each additional unit becomes less valuable to the consumer. This naturally leads us to our next concept. Let me first explain the total utility table. Let us examine the table carefully. Notice that after consuming the first unit, total utility equals 20 utils. Okay, but after consuming the second unit, total utility rises to 38 utils. After the third unit, it becomes 54, then 66, 74, 78, and then the first glance, total utility is increasing throughout most of the table. However, notice something very important. The increase becomes smaller with every additional unit. Between the first and second units, utility increases by 10 utils. Between the second and the third units, utility increases by 16 utils only. Later, it increases by only 12 utils, then only 8 utils, finally only 4. Eventually, total utility stops increasing altogether, so it remains 78 when the consumer consumes the 7th unit. After consuming too much of the product, total utility may even begin to decline. Observe between 7 and 8, total utility starts to decline. This reflects real human behavior. Think about your favorite meal. The first serving taste wonderful. The second is still enjoyable. The third becomes less exciting. Eventually, you become full. Eating more actually reduces your satisfaction. And this is exactly what economists observe. Total utility generally increases as consumption increases, but at a decreasing rate. Let us come to the concept of marginal utility. Marginal utility means additional or extra. Additional or extra. Marginal means additional or extra. Therefore, marginal utility refers to the additional satisfaction obtained from consuming one more unit of a good or a service. It is calculated as the change in total utility resulting from consuming one additional unit. Look at the table. Look at the table where we have units in the first column, total utility in the second column, and marginal utility in the third column. The first unit gives total utility of 20 utils. The second unit provides an additional of 18 utils. The third provides 16 utils. The fourth 12, the fifth 8, the sixth 4, and then no more satisfaction, and then less satisfaction. So if consumption, this means marginal utility can become zero and negative. This means consuming another unit provides no extra satisfaction. So if consumption continues, marginal utility becomes negative. In other words, additional consumption actually makes the consumer worse off. This explains why people eventually stop buying or consuming the same product. The law of diminishing marginal utility. This law is one of the most famous principles in economics. It states that as a consumer consumes additional units of the same commodity, the marginal utility obtained from each successive unit decreases, assuming all other factors remain constant. Notice that the law does not say total utility decreases immediately. Instead, it says that marginal utility decreases. This distinction is extremely important. Let us use the pizza example. The first slice is delicious. The second slice is still enjoyable. The third slice is pleasant but less exciting. The fourth slice provides very little additional satisfaction. The fifth slice may not provide any additional enjoyment. The sixth slice even cause discomfort. This law explains many consumer decisions in everyday life. It also helps explain why demand curves generally slope downward. As consumers receive less additional satisfaction from each extra unit, they are only willing to purchase more if the price falls. Let us come to consumer equilibrium for a single commodity. Now let us answer another important question. How does a consumer know when to stop buying? According to the Cardinal utility theory, the consumer reaches equilibrium when the marginal utility from the last unit purchased equals the price paid for that that unit. If marginal utility is greater than price, the consumer should continue purchasing. If marginal utility is less than price, purchasing another unit would reduce overall satisfaction. Therefore, the rational consumer stops buying when his marginal utility equals the price. At this point, total satisfaction has been maximized given the consumer's limited income. This is called consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium with multiple commodities or multiple goods. Real consumers rarely purchase only one product. Instead, they buy food, clothing, transport, entertainment, education, and many other goods simultaneously. So, how should income be allocated? Okay? Among many different products, the answer is given by the equi-marginal principle. This principle states that consumer maximize satisfaction when the marginal utility per unit of money spent, marginal utility X divided by price X, is equal across all goods. See here, marginal utility from good X divided by price X should be equal to marginal utility of good Y divided by price Y should be equal to marginal utility of good Z divided by price Z. Suppose you are deciding between books and coffee. If $1 spent on books provides more satisfaction than $1 spent on coffee, you should spend more on books. As you continue buying books, their marginal utility decreases. Eventually, the satisfaction gained from the last dollar spent on books equals the satisfaction gained from the last dollar spent on coffee. At that point, your income is allocated efficiently. This principle of equimarginal explains how consumers distribute limited budgets across many competing needs. Let us take a practical example. Let us apply this concept. Imagine a student purchasing bottles of water. The first bottle provides extremely high satisfaction, 30. The second also provides considerable satisfaction. The third and fourth bottles continue to provide positive benefits. By the fifth bottle, marginal utility has fallen until it equals to the price. Until it is equals to the price. This is the equilibrium point. Purchasing a sixth bottle would provide less satisfaction than its cost. Therefore, a rational consumer decides not to buy it. This example demonstrates how economic theory can explain ordinary decisions that we make every day. Slide 10 and 11 give you a class quiz that every student should solve in order to revise the main concepts we have mentioned during this lecture. So let us review today's lecture. I encourage you not simply to memorize definitions. Instead, think carefully about the economic reasoning behind each answer. Ask yourself, why does marginal utility decrease? Why doesn't total utility always increase forever? Why does consumer equilibrium occur when marginal utility equals price? How does the equi-marginal principle help consumers allocate limited income? If you understand these ideas, you will have mastered one of the foundations of the consumer theory. So today we studied one of the earliest theories of consumer behavior. We learned that utility represents satisfaction. We distinguished between total utility and marginal utility. We explained the law of diminishing marginal utility. We discussed consumer equilibrium and the equi-marginal principle. Although economists now use more advanced theories, cardinal utility analysis remains extremely important because it introduces the concept that form the basis of modern consumer theory. In our next lecture, we will study indifference curve analysis, which explains consumer behavior without assuming that satisfaction can be measured numerically. Thank you very much for your attention. I encourage you to review today's lecture, solve the quiz questions, and think about examples from your own daily life where the law of diminishing marginal utility applies. I look forward to meeting you in our next lecture. Thank you, and may you have productive and successful day.